I got some questions because I did announce that you were
Oh,
coming
good.
to the Facebook group. So I do
Oh,
have,
okay.
and it's not going to be Corona, but it's going to be how, well, you'll see. There's questions about how Corona is affecting them.
Ah,
Because
okay.
everybody, only people
Sure.
care about how it affects you,
Of
right?
course. It's kind of amazing how that's happening. So yes, well, humans gonna human.
Hey, I think we are live. It always takes a second with this technology for me to actually see the people, or I don't actually see them, but oh, I know they're there. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a treat today. We have the goddess of evolutionary psychology in the house.
The
She is,
goddess.
she is
I
the,
like that title.
yes, that's
Go
what
with that.
I
Where's
are.
my t-shirt and my bling and my accoutrements? I feel like I need a full uniform to go with that title.
Well, you know what? Now that you said that, I happen to have a very dear friend that designs t-shirts. So we're
Oh no. I've summoned something.
that is so funny. And you may know her as the co-star of the wonderful Beat Your Jeans podcast, which airs every Wednesday night live on Blog Talk Radio. There are over 200 episodes now. And if you want to know about the coronavirus, they talked about it last show. So listen to that, because we're not going to just be talking Corona Day, but we are going to be talking about how Corona is affecting some of your progress. And that's really why I wanted Dr. Jen Howk to talk about this. So first of all, welcome. It's just so, I love talking to you. You are just the funnest person and the
Oh,
most
that's
inspiring and
great
intelligent.
to be
And
here.
if you
Oh,
didn't see her on the Truth About Weight Loss Summit, she's lost almost 100 pounds, and she's struggled with some of the same things that all of us have struggled with. But I have her here today as a psychologist because, Dr. Hawk, what I'm hearing from the people in the classes I teach is that because we have the sheltering in place, their routines are being disrupted,
yes.
meaning they can't go to the gym because the gym is closed. They can't do their work, and so they're worried that they're either going to regain weight that they've lost or not be able to lose weight because they can't get their organic kale, and they're afraid to eat starches, and now they're sitting home snacking. So I want to know your opinion on how do we help these people calm down, that
Yeah.
this too shall pass, and that we can't use this as an excuse to put weight back on. I mean, if anything, now you've got time to maybe develop some habits. So take
Yeah.
it away, Dr. Hawk.
Yeah, no, well, it is always great to be here, and I have gotten a lot of questions about this, and I mean, it makes sense because essentially what happens, and for people who are unfamiliar with me or with Dr. Lyle, we take an evolutionary psychology approach to the world, and so what that means is that we're really grounding psychological questions in a paradigm of humans as animals, just like any other animal. So we've adapted to solve certain problems in our ancestral history. We've developed fingers and opposable thumbs and belly buttons and ears and eyeballs on the front of our face and all of these things that made us more skillful and adapted to the environment that we found ourselves in. And it turns out that the human brain is exactly the same way. And so are things like our hunger drive. And so are things like the way that we try to solve problems around our hunger drive and its interaction with our environment at any given time. And so, I've talked before with you and elsewhere about the idea of emotional eating. A lot of people kind of look at a situation like this very disruptive little moment and say, oh, well, it's making me emotionally eat because I'm afraid and I'm having anxiety and I'm trying to soothe my system because when I felt this way when I was a child, my mom would she'd go get a pizza we had a place in the town that I grew up in the middle of Alaska called Starvin' Marvin's. If anyone is from Wasilla, Alaska, we were big fans of Starvin' Marvin's. Starvin' Marvin's also had a really great arcade, but I digress. But that was our sort of that was our, oh, shit has hit the fan food. We'd go get 2 giant pizzas from Starvin' Marvin's and bring it home. And that was the comfort food. And so for many years, I also thought, oh, well, I go to replicate this experience when I'm feeling agitated by circumstances in the world. It makes perfect intuitive sense that that's what would be going on. And that's not quite what's going on. What's going on is that you're an animal who's trying to solve a survival problem. Your whole human existence, just like any other animal on planet Earth and in the universe, exists to get its genes into the next generation. You exist to survive long enough so you can reproduce. That's the entire game. And so everything that you're doing, any kind of motivation that you have, any desire to do anything or to not do anything, is being driven and constrained by that goal. So you don't want to waste time and energy unless it's going to be the most efficient way to survive and or reproduce. And when we get into a situation where everything's disrupted and we don't know what's going on and it's very uncertain and we don't know what kind of food's coming in and what's going to happen tomorrow and if we're going to have our job or if our husband's going to have his job or any of this kind of stuff, it's not that the stress is making us emotionally eat. It's that the stress is dialing up the urgency of solving the survival problem. So you become increasingly sensitized to, okay, what is the most guaranteed way to guarantee my success as an organism that needs to survive and reproduce? Like, what are the things that I know will benefit that? Well, sex and food are the things that are most beneficial to survival and reproduction, turns out. And if you have food available to you that is richer in calories relative to other food that is available to you, the correct thing to do from an evolutionary perspective is to go for the richer food. This is just what we do. This is what the pleasure trap is. This is why we talk about the pleasure trap all the time. You are absolutely hardwired in your adaptive history by evolution to, all things equal, go for the richer food, get the most calories per bite, particularly when you're in a situation of stress and uncertainty and you don't know where the next meal is coming from. So all of those things are really amplifying our desire to get a sure thing, evolutionarily speaking. And that sure thing probably looks like a frozen vegan pizza from Whole Foods instead of like assembling whatever mix of dry goods you have in your cabinet along with some old freezer burned vegetables into some kind of soup, which is what I did yesterday because I'm moving soon and I'm trying to use up all of my old stuff anyway. But I, like everybody else, I'm feeling that sort of call like, oh crap, shit has hit the fan. We don't know what's happening. It's time to eat really calorie rich food. So of course that's happening. It's not your fault. It doesn't make you a weak person. You're not emotionally eating. You are just an animal trying to solve a survival problem. That's all it is. So within that, everybody has kind of a different relationship to the situation. So AJ, you're saying, don't let this be an excuse to gain weight. This is a great opportunity to really buckle down and tighten the screws and make some progress. That is going to be true for some people, but this is where personality is so important. So we talk on the podcast all the time about personality, which is very genetic, just like your eye color and your propensity to put on weight and whether you prefer cats or dogs. That's all genetic. We can talk about that more if people want. But this is what the science is telling us, increasingly so as we replicate these studies more and more. We have 15 million of these identical twin studies that are really narrowing in on the genetic origins of personality and all of these things. So if you have a personality that is sort of going to greet a situation of adversity like this with a rallying, motivational sort of, this is a great opportunity to kick some ass and to really make some progress on my goals, then God bless you. That is a beautiful opportunity. And some people are going to respond to the situation like that. And it is a great opportunity to do those things. Other people do not have that kind of personality. They're less emotionally stable. They're maybe a little less open to experience. They, whatever sort of cocktail of personality characteristics they have, they're just going to get a little more afraid. They're going to dial it in a little more. Their anxiety about their survival problem is a little more intense, and they're going to slip a little bit. And they may regain some weight and they may lose some of their progress. But this is where we don't want to catastrophize because of that. So, you used my favorite phrase, this too shall pass. I've had that on a little plaque that lives in my house ever since some people know that I used to be like a hardcore Buddhist and went on retreats all the time and got really involved in a particular Buddhist lineage. And that was like my mantra, this too shall pass. No matter how exhilarating and grand and wonderful it is, it's gonna pass. And no matter how crappy and awful and terrible it is, that too will pass. So everything is a wave, it's clouds passing through the sky, it all shifts. You are here no matter what. So greeting this moment as a really uncomfortable moment that may sort of misdirect your motivational process in the short term and lead you into some high density, high calorie food. Maybe you're going to gain a little weight. This is no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater and completely give up on your goals. But it may be cause for you to be a little bit kind to yourself and have some compassion for the fact that you're an animal who is scared and going through a really difficult process and you don't know where this is going yet. And in a couple of weeks, we'll have a lot more information. We'll be on much firmer ground with all of this. And you'll be able, your motivational process regarding your health goals is going to move in concert with your informational matrix of what's happening in the world. So as you become more certain about where things are going, you naturally, your motivation to prioritize your health will come back if it's gone in the moment. So if it's gone in the moment, you know, that's okay. That's okay. Try to do your best. You're going to feel a lot better about things if you do eat well. So, you know, it feels like you self-medicate with a bunch of trashy food. Ultimately, that's just really going to corrode your ability to kind of be present and stay in the moment and be resilient to all of this, because you're not going to be sleeping very well. You're going to feel crappy. And no great crime, but it does, you know, there's some greater good in being as healthy as you can, taking as good a care of yourself and your immune system, by the way, as you can, which healthy food is a big part of supporting your immune system, getting really good sleep, getting some sunshine every day. These are the most important things that you can be doing for yourself right now, regardless of how much turbulence you're having with regard to your specific goals.
That's great. That is very reassuring. How can we articulate to people that relapse is not fatal? Like a couple of these questions that came in, apparently, I don't really follow anybody. I don't have time, but there's people in the plant-based world that maybe have lost weight, or they have a channel and they've lost a lot of weight and they have publicly gained it back. And now people are scared that they're going to lose because so-and-so gained weight. Well, that's going to happen to me too. And I'm scared. You always have said that relapse is part of the recovery.
Relapse is part of recovery. Yeah.
With food, for some people, it really seems like, okay, this is it. I ate a cookie and now it's going to be 10 years till I eat a carrot again. How can we help people get back on track a little bit quicker?
Yeah, no, it's really great. And that is speaking to, again, these sort of like deep ancestral processes that we've adapted to really just throw over the table and go back into the rich foods. So yeah, that phrase, relapse is part of recovery, that's something that I got from my experience with 12-step, because I'm sober from alcohol going on 7 years. And that's one of the you know, wise chestnuts that you'll hear in the rooms at AA. And what it means, what it's really, I was always sort of confused by that phrase. Like, what the hell does that mean? What is relapse as part of recovery? But what it's speaking to is that as you're trying to change your behavior around something, behavior only changes in any given human because of a changed cost benefit analysis. So this goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago. So everything is the result of a cost benefit analysis. You are not going to do something unless your brain looks at that problem and says the cost of taking an action is you know, lower than the perceived benefit that I'm going to get. So there's a cost associated with eating healthfully, because you're giving up the tasty food and the trashy food that you could otherwise be eating. It takes a little more effort. You have to learn how to cook. You have to go to some trouble to make this happen. That requires time and energy. You're only going to invest that time and energy if you're perceiving a pretty good benefit on the other side of the equation. That's where motivation comes from. Motivation is the result of a good cost benefit analysis. And so a cost benefit analysis changes as you change information. So my cost benefit analysis regarding eating healthy food is probably going to be different, all things equal, if I am facing some serious health situation versus if I'm not. So if I'm a relatively healthy weight and I've got no problems with my health, it's like, how much trouble am I really going to go to tighten the screws on this diet and eat a super healthy diet? Probably not that much. But if I'm facing some major autoimmune condition, or I have heart disease pathology, or there's something that's really motivating me I'm looking at the future and saying, hey, if I change my behavior, even though it's kind of suck and it's not going to be very comfortable, I'm estimating a pretty big payoff at the end of that. So let's maybe think about changing that behavior. That's where behavioral change actually comes from. So with relapse as part of recovery, the idea is that you want to try to change your habits. So with me, with alcohol, I'm like, I got to stop drinking. This has become a problem, turning into my alcoholic father. I don't want this to happen. So I'm going to quit. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to quit because I'm perceiving that there's a benefit to stopping drinking alcohol that is higher than the cost of giving it up, which is significant. Cost of giving it up is social costs, interpersonal costs. Like it's an addiction, right? And so you get into it and then you start doubting yourself and you start thinking, well, maybe that perceived benefit's not that great because this cost is a little higher than I thought it was going to be. And so how about I have another drink and relapse? So then you relapse. And then you experience the cost of relapse. And the cost of relapse is a lot higher than you were estimating that to be. So you relapse, it's miserable, you find that you're out of control, and it's like, okay, wait, I've got to recalculate the whole spreadsheet because my cost benefit analysis was off. I wasn't accounting for the fact that the continuing to drink is actually a lot more costly than I thought it was. So tick, 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 update, update, update. The cost benefit analysis updates and changes, and therefore the behavior changes, and I become less likely to relapse the next time. So every time I relapse, that spreadsheet gets updated in the same sort of way. The cost of relapse is increasingly high. And at some point it's so high, like I think about relapsing now and I remember the withdrawal. I remember how difficult it was to claw my way back out of that once I got sucked back in. And like, I'm never doing it again. It was too freaking painful. That cost is way higher than the cost, whatever cost I pay for not being able to go to the bar with my friends and have an easy conversation on a date, and, you know, all the sort of social benefits that come with that. So that's what it is. And the same thing happens with food, where if you're eating a very healthy diet and you slip off the rails because you get out of your groove and circumstances change, or you walk past a Cinnabon or whatever it is that sort of pulls you back into the pleasure trap, every time you do that, you're updating the informational matrix that informs your cost benefit analysis that it's probably not that worth it, because you think it's worth it, but that's a illusion. You were incorrect with your estimate of the potential benefit, and you were incorrect with the estimate of the potential cost. So the only way to improve those estimates is to experience it. And you wake up after you fell face down in a platter of vegan nachos, and you're salty and you're bloated and you feel like crap and you hate yourself, and you spend a bunch of money and everything sucks. You're like, oh, okay, well, this is terrible. Let's not do it again. And of course, the pleasure trap interacts with that, pulls people back into the addictive process for some amount of time. But this is all you have to learn. You have to update your information to update the cost benefit, which is what changes behavior. Behavior can't change otherwise.
That's really interesting. I haven't met the person yet that was like ever said the relapse, God, that was really worth it.
Yeah. Right. Like, oh boy, that was sure fun, and I'd do that again. Like, no, it was always a source of regret. And like alcohol, similar to cigarettes, and obviously with food, most people who are trying to quit an addictive substance, it takes several serious efforts before it finally takes. Like, I didn't get sober permanently until probably my fourth or fifth really serious, like, okay, all hands on deck, we're going to do this kind of attempt. So I'd get like 2 months in, 3 months in, 4 months in, and I'd slip. And so it takes some time, it takes some iteration. And with food, because it's less, it's just the costs are lower overall, because you're not dealing with such a super normal stimulus. It is super normal in many ways, but it's not hijacking the endorphin pathways in the same way. It's not quite the same psychoactive property as some of the things that we'll get ourselves addicted to. It's a lower level process. And so you're going to have more little slips and little relapses, and the cost is relative to the cost of relapsing on alcohol is lower. So you're more likely to do it more often. But it's fine. It's like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. You know, you're not, nobody expects you to be perfect. Depending on your personality attributes, it's probably unlikely, if not impossible, that you are going to be perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. I'm extremely imperfect. It doesn't stop you from losing weight. It just slows you down. So if you need to lose 50 pounds, and perfection would have you losing that 50 pounds in the next 12 months, and a B+ job is 14 months instead of 12 months, who cares? It took a little bit longer. You slipped a couple of times. You had some Cinnabon, you had some vegan pizza, whatever your drug of choice is. You got back in the process and you did the best you could on an ongoing basis. And that's what you need to do to both be successful long-term and to stoke the process of self-esteem that is going to have the inherent motivation to keep you going, which is really the key to everything.
This is great. Were you ever a fan of Seinfeld? Did you watch
Oh
Seinfeld?
God, yeah. Seinfeld was evolutionary psychology before evolutionary psychology was cool. Like, those guys understood human nature very deeply.
Oh, that's cool, because I actually just met him. My friend is a friend of his, and
amazing.
He's wonderful. But do you remember
amazing.
the episode with Jamie? I think it was Jamie Gertz, where she didn't have a spare to square of the toilet paper.
I remember this story. Yeah.
Reminds me of what's going on now. And Jan, watching live, actually said, "What is going on? Why are people hoarding toilet paper?"
Well, yes, they're hoarding everything because they are in a feedback process where humans are much more sensitized to scarcity than we are to abundance. So what killed most of our ancestors in the Stone Age was some form of scarcity, particularly food scarcity. This is part of why we adapted in such a way that if we see rich food in the environment, our very strong evolutionary inclination is to slurp it up before anybody else gets it, because we don't know where our next meal is coming from. And that was the deadliest thing to our ancestors, all things equal, was starvation. So we're extremely sensitized to scarcity. And this is part of why programs that peddle something that taps into our scarcity fear are very successful. So things with like superfoods, nutritional, very, very special little nutritional amounts of things that you need to defeat scary things like cancer. These are things that are tapping into those scarcity algorithms. So humans are we're freaked out about scarcity in general. And then we have these social dynamics where you go to the store, and I saw this in myself. I went to the store to get oatmeal, which is one of my staples. Like I eat a lot of oatmeal. And there were 3 containers of oatmeal left on that shelf. And it's like, I know rationally that the supply chains are absolutely in place and that the oatmeal is going to continue to get to Safeway. This is not a catastrophe. But my little Stone Age brain sees those 3 and is like, oh my God, there's only 3 left. I better get them. So this is why there are runs on banks, like this is how the Depression happened. It's like people take their money out of the bank because they get scared. It's like, oh, well, they're taking their money. I better take my money because now my money's not going to be worth it. So it's a feedback process. Once it begins, it's very difficult to arrest that process because people go and they see that there's not much to go around. And particularly if they have children, they're like, they have to protect their genes are walking around. They got to defend it. And it's very difficult, just like it's very difficult to override your susceptibility to the pleasure trap, very difficult to override your susceptibility to want to sort of protect number one in the face of what looks like a pretty serious disaster scarcity. You want to sort of, circle the wagons and protect you and yours, and wrap a bunch of toilet paper around everybody to keep the bad guys at bay. And so it's absolutely until people get calmed down enough and start to see that, okay, the supply chains are working, the truck drivers are still like bringing new deliveries. You don't need to hoard, but that's going to take a lot of time to calm down.
That is something. You're from Wasilla. Is that where you grew up? Was Wasilla?
I'm from Wasilla. Me and Sarah Palin. Yep.
It's so funny because that is one place I've actually spoken there. And
you've spoken in Wasilla.
There apparently is a vegetarian society there, and I spoke in Wasilla. It was very nice. Actually.
There was no vegetarian society when I last lived there, but I last lived there over 20 years ago. So
it was a few years ago, and there was at least 100 people there in Wasilla. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, good for them. Yeah. Wasilla is a funny little place. It's a little little burb about 50 miles from Anchorage. So very beautiful little location, but kind of a glorified strip mall in a lot of ways. So I'm from Wasilla. My brother, as some people know, is in a band called Portugal the Man. They're all from Wasilla. So we've been trying to put poor little Wasilla on the map. And along with Sarah Palin, who I've known for many, many years, she worked for the same newspaper that my mother was editor of way back in the day. So I first met Sarah back in like 1988.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Jan says, but why toilet paper per se? Is it because when we freak out, we are concerned about elimination?
I don't think there's any good answer for that. I don't think there's a uniform answer for that. I think toilet paper is one of those things that people, I've watched people wheel pallets of bottled water out of the store as well. I think initially when the first reports of this thing were coming out and saying, prepare for potentially sheltering in place for a couple of weeks, people were translating that through their sort of grid down scenario, worst case scenario planning, i.e. there's a big natural disaster, we don't have running water, we don't have electricity, get the fundamentals of life to sort of keep you going. And toilet paper makes that list for most people. So you've got people, very conscientious people going to the store in that early wave of hoarding, and they're getting things like bottled water, toilet paper, disposable plates, all these kinds of things, which become the first things to disappear. And then that initiates the panic. And then, the second wave of the slightly less conscientious people who make it to the store in the second wave, they're like, oh no, we're out of toilet paper. This is actually a problem. Like we better hoard everything. And so then you get the current situation. So yeah.
So Donna says, gee, I feel like she is giving me permission to relapse.
That seems like a transference of responsibility. I mean, at the end of the day, it's you and your food, right? It's you and your choices and your personality and your food, and only you can run that motivational process and make that decision for yourself. Like, nobody ever gave me permission to relapse in alcohol. I found ways to justify it to myself. I'm not giving you permission, but I'm not telling you it's the end of the world that you do it. I'm not being moralistic about it at all. I'm saying that humans, I'm always using the example of my dogs because I live with these two big, ridiculous dogs. And if I left those dogs alone with a bunch of canned food sitting out on the floor, and I left the house and I said, now don't get into that because you're on a diet and you need to be, doing a good job and taking care of yourself and staying healthy, and go eat the kibble instead. I leave for 5 minutes and I come back and they're going to have eaten all of the canned food and anything else that they can get into. We are exactly the same. We've got a few more cc's of brain up there that allow us to kind of like estimate into the future and run a slightly more complex motivational process, just like the dog will. Like, the dog has a little bit of dissonance, like, how much trouble am I going to get into for doing this? Like, what's the cost versus the benefit? The benefit's pretty high, gonna do it. And so we are just the same way. So it takes a very unusual personality and a very unusual set of motivational circumstances to defeat the pleasure trap on a good day. And so given the fact that things are very disrupted right now, again, in a very temporary sort of way, Dr. Lyle and I have talked a great deal on the podcast last week. We talk again this week. We pre-recorded this week, so we've already done the show, but we run through the data again and really sort of drive home the notion of where the data is triangulating, that it's not this big indiscriminate terrifying thing that it has like some 5 or 10% death rate. That's not what it is. And as this becomes more clear that it's really something akin to a really nasty flu that's going to present a very significant burden on our health systems and our institutions, but nonetheless one that I believe are resilient to in the end. It's just one we haven't gone through before. As that becomes more clear, the panic, the overall uncertainty, and the existential panic and the social hysteria are going to get dialed down. So this is a temporary moment. It's not that I'm giving you permission to relapse. I'm giving you the context of, if you do relapse, this is not cause for you to go full scale into the ego trap and completely throw over the table against the goals that you have for yourself. Just to understand that this is likely part of the process for most people.
Well, I look at it that all of us teach to have a clean environment. And if you had a clean environment, what are you going to relapse on? I mean,
right.
Right.
Right. I mean, I live probably a quarter of a mile from a Whole Foods, which is a dangerous place to live. And so I've been just like everybody else. I had a friend who was last week saying that, he's hearing rumors that that martial law is going to be declared and that this is going to get real gnarly. And it's like a little bell goes off in your head that's like, well, I better get it while the getting's good. I better go get all of my favorite things, all of my favorite relapse foods, because who knows what the future holds. This is the way that the machine works. And I can run that through my own motivational matrix and be like, no, it's not a good idea. And again, in AA, they call that play the tape all the way through. So before you go to the bar and have a drink, okay, so yeah, that'll be nice. That'll feel really good. You'll get a nice little dopamine surge. You can flirt with somebody. It'll all be fine. You'll have a nice night. But then what? Then what happens? How do you feel about yourself in the morning? How given your past experiences and relapse as part of recovery, don't you think that maybe that's going to put you back down the rabbit hole in a way that you don't necessarily want to put yourself in that position where you have to claw your way back out at great personal suffering to do so, and maybe not make it this time? Like the last time I got sober, I barely got sober. It was marginal. And so obviously, again, food, the stakes are not as high, but it's like, nah, okay, before I go to Whole Foods, like, let's just think about this for a second. Like, what am I trying to do? What problem am I trying to solve? What is my little animal Stone Age brain what is it panicking about? How can I have a little bit of mindfulness and discernment about that process and calm myself? So again, my meditative experience in past will often come into play here, where it's like, okay, well, if it's that urgent to get the crappy food over at the store, it can wait half an hour. So, you know, in the next half an hour, I'm going to go eat half a pound of steamed potatoes that I have in the fridge. I'm going to have something that I can use to kind of like subdue the system, and run a different CB in half an hour or an hour. So not taking any sort of scarcity driven urgent action is the first line of defense against that kind of thing. And almost always that alone is enough to quiet it down, and your rationality magically comes back online when you check back in with it.
That's terrific. Thank you. So we have a question live from Jessica that's very similar to one that's been sent in. So I'll read them both. So Jessica says, I'd love to hear Dr. Hawk's perspective on food addiction. I'm struggling with this. And then I have a question that's a little bit more in depth, but similar, because you'll have to talk about how you feel about food addiction to answer this one from Stephanie, which is, recently I've started seeing a therapist for food addiction. I was so discouraged when she said that at some point I will be able to reintroduce the addictive foods back into my diet. As soon as she said that, I thought she must not be familiar with food addiction. She wants to treat what triggers me to eat. What are your thoughts on continuing treatment with this therapist and her approach? I find food addiction to be so frustrating because not too many around me understand it. I appreciate any insight you can give.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be nice about this. I'm going to channel Dr. Lyle, he'd be very disagreeable and dismissive of this. So that kind of therapist is taking a very typical approach that a lot of therapists and a lot of practitioners will, which is that you are addicted to foods because of some kind of childhood process, some kind of childhood trauma, some kind of former experience in your life that has caused some kind of emotional damage that is compelling you to self-medicate with food. That's the paradigm. And a lot of different people they'll take different kinds of approaches. Sometimes it's, it's unseen childhood experiences. Sometimes it's what you learned about food growing up and what role food played in your household. Whatever form this takes, it's some form of what we call learning theory, which is the sort of dominant paradigm of human behavior, i.e. Nature over nurture. So there was a big nature nurture debate for many, many decades. What really are humans about? Are they more shaped by their childhood experiences in nature, or are they more just kind of who they are genetically, i.e. I might be swapping these up together. So are they more who they are, i.e. nature, rather than were they nurtured into becoming who they are? And we know the answer to this question. We know that it is nature. We know that it is who you are, your genetic predisposition to all your propensity to put on and keep on weight, the correlation for obesity among identical twins, even if they are raised in radically different food environments and radically different home environments in general, with different levels of discipline and different levels of physical activity, and you name it, it doesn't matter. The correlation is still somewhere between 80 and 90%. So they are very likely, if you check in with them as adults, once they get out of their childhood environment, they converge on being pretty much exactly the same level of overweight, because the genes are just powerfully moving them there as you control for the environment, and they return to eating the same kind of foods that they are drawn to eating to begin with. So all of this is just a very long way of saying that these therapists who are looking at learning theory and early life experiences as the driving force of food addiction are completely misguided. They're absolutely incorrect. That is not what is driving food addiction. What is driving food addiction is the presence of supernormal food in the environment. So it is not possible to become addicted to something that would have been present in the Stone Age. There was no addiction in the Stone Age. There was no addictive eating. There was emotional eating in the same sort of sense that if people got attacked by some marauding tribe of barbarians and they didn't know, where their next meal was going to come from, they were still going for the richest food in the environment. They were still trying to self-soothe with the dopamine process that comes by eating a lot of potatoes. They were self-medicating in that same kind of sense. But you're not gonna reach a significant level of obesity by self-medicating on whole natural food, no matter how much you do it. Some people will. There are exceptions to every bell curve rule. Obviously, there are some people who really will stuff themselves with potatoes to the point where they could gain significant weight. Those people are very, very rare. Dr. Lyle, and many decades of practice, has run into like 3 of them tops. So this is a very rare process. What's really happening with food addiction is that you're exposed to food that would not have existed in the ancestral environment for one reason or another, either because it is processed beyond recognition, and so it is some sort of food-like product that just absolutely, there's nothing resembling it would have existed in the Stone Age, or it's some artificially concentrated whole natural food adjacent sort of products like flour, like cereals, like any combination of things that we will put together. So there's a range of super normality to food that we will eat that ranges from the whole natural food being absolutely not super normal, being like an apple, to something like applesauce, to apple juice, to just dial it down, keep extracting the sugar out, all the way to apple sugar, or dried apple mixed with sugar. And then you start to mix apple, like whole apples, into something like an apple pie, which is taking even a whole natural food kind of situation and adding fat to the sugar, mixing flavors and textures in ways that are behaving as if they're super normal. So anything that looks like a food addiction is somewhere on the spectrum of a super normal substance. You were not going to develop food addiction to whole, natural, ancestrally compliant food. You just are not. So if you're returning to some kind of addictive pattern around food, it's because you have something that is too super normal for you in your environment, and you just need to, if you have that susceptibility, you need to tighten those screws more tightly and move down the red line toward the direction of deprocessing that food, even if it seems like it should be compliant and like it's very healthy, even if that is just the process of not mixing it with other compliant foods.
Wow, thank you. Kara or Kara says, oh, it just went away. I think my personality and CBA is keeping me from reaching my goal weight. How can I overcome that? Is it even possible?
Well, I need to know a little bit more about what she means. So personality and the cost benefit analysis that will come from personality can sometimes keep you, it will hold you steady just short of your goal a lot of times. So it's very reasonable for somebody who is trying to lose a lot of weight to be very successful for some period of time, because again, remember what the cost benefit analysis is. You're estimating the potential payoff of going to all of this trouble to change your behavior. So if somebody wants to lose 100 pounds and they lose 50 of them, they have been estimating that if they lose the 100 pounds, they're going to get the kind of feedback from other people that will change their life experience. They're going to get more esteem from other people. That's why we call our website Esteem Dynamics. So that's what's going to be fundamentally motivating for a lot of people. They want better romantic feedback. They want better feedback from their friends. They want better feedback from people at work. They want to just be a little higher in status in the Stone Age village. And they think if they lose the weight, then they will get that feedback that they are so desperately craving. And what happens is that people will get some part of the way down that process. And so they lose half of the weight that they want to lose, or 3/4 of the weight that they want to lose. And they look around and they're getting a lot of positive feedback. Suddenly people are asking them out that never asked them out before. They're getting people at work saying, oh my gosh, you look really good. Their friends are jealous. What are you doing? You look great. They're getting all of these esteem signals. And so the nervous system says, hold up a second. Just like the relapse is part of recovery changes the spreadsheet, this kind of information can also change the spreadsheet, because it's like, wait. We're going to an awful lot of trouble here to get what we're already getting. Are we really going to get that much more positive feedback if we lose another 20 pounds? Yeah, it doesn't seem very likely. What we've got is pretty good. We basically qualify for the sort of feedback that we wanted to get to begin with. And so all things equal, continuing to invest in this difficult, unpleasant process of eating kale instead of pizza, I don't think it's worth it. So therefore, we're shutting down this operation. We're ending this whole process right now. Game over. The CB has changed. So that everybody is kind of susceptible to that process, because that's just how the cost benefit analysis is going to work, interacting with esteem feedback. But obviously there's a spectrum of reaction to other people's feedback that is going to be personality dependent. So if you were somebody who is a little more emotionally stable, perhaps perhaps a little more agreeable. Those kinds of things are going to converge and make you much more likely to be satisfied with a certain status quo when you hit it, rather than to keep struggling and keep fighting to get down to some specific number or to get more feedback from people when you think with the feedback that you've got is pretty good. So personality absolutely can change. It's personality is what it assigns the pair of goggles that you wear to look at the world. So everybody's running the same types of algorithms and the same kinds of analysis, but the color of the world that they look at is absolutely determined by what their personality is telling them is reality or not. And if you have a personality that's a little sort of it doesn't like to compete so much, and a lot of people do, then you're going to hit some point in your process where it's good enough, and your nervous system will say, shut down that cost benefit analysis.
Right. She says that she's highly open and agreeable, lost 70 to 80, has 20 to 30 to go. So
yeah, story as old as time. So yeah, you've done a really good job, and you've made a lot of good progress, and you've probably gotten a lot of really positive feedback. And the nature of being agreeable means that you're essentially systematically undervaluing yourself, and you're taking less than you have coming to you. So if you're splitting a piece of pie with somebody, you take 40%, and you're like, no, that's okay. You can have the bigger slice. It doesn't bother me. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm good with this. That's what agreeableness is. And so when it translates into an esteem dynamic and an esteem process, you lose 70 or 80 pounds, and you're getting good positive feedback, and you're like, you know what, this is pretty good. Like, I feel pretty happy with this. I don't need more than this. This is fine. Like, not worth the effort. So that will definitely drive that process.
nice. Kelly says, I just relapsed on my 5-year-old Doritos. I would ask, what the heck are you giving a 5-year-old Doritos for? No.
Yeah. Oh, was it a 5-year-old Doritos at home, or a package of 5-year-old Doritos? That's what I can't quite.
Oh yeah, I think I think she has a 5-year-old that she gave.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, 5-year-old probably shouldn't. I mean, it's still in your environment. So anything that you're feeding your kids is, unless it's in a separate locked cabinet that only your spouse has a key to, that needs to be considered as in your environment. And even if you have a lot of willpower and a lot of self-control to stay out of it in normal circumstances, you scramble the cost benefit analysis by imposing a big crisis and uncertainty on top of the world, and that nothing is off limits if it's in your environment. So,
you know, I interview a lot of pediatricians, and I just don't understand, if a grown-up knows the food is not good for them, why are they giving it to their child, especially one that young that doesn't drive or have a job?
Yeah. I mean, it's not the end of the world to give a kid Doritos. That, you know, it's not ideal. Obviously, I can see, again, kind of going back to the idea that a lot of people are stuck at home with kids and spouses that they may not like very much, and struggling and just having a hard time keeping it together. And they're doing what they can to kind of like, i.e., there are no limits on screen time for kids right now. Like, normally you might not want to have your kids sitting with an iPad all day, but right now it's like, okay, let's pick our battles wisely. So with something like, if you're buying a little bit of quiet and a little bit of mommy time by giving the kids some junk food, it's not the end of the world. It's not optimally something that you want to be doing on an ongoing basis. Least of all because it provides a threat for your health goals. So you just, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. Someone wise said that.
Right. That's very good. So what Laurel posted something that I am hearing a lot now. Working at home in my clean environment means that I have been binging on healthy food. How do I stop eating? Dr. Hawk, do people misuse the word binging? Because I actually was bulimic in my 20s, and I have never binged on healthy food, ever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even overeat on healthy food because it's so filling, I can't. So number one, do people sometimes just really misuse that word when they're really not binging? And also, I mean, this idea that people overeat on starch, I just don't understand, because people that don't have a history of discordant eating or weight, I don't see regular people just having a problem eating starch.
Yeah. So to some degree, it's a misuse of the term, in the sense that unless you're really systematically doing what we would call eating into the pain, so like really causing yourself great distress to the point where you would want to vomit, or you're like extremely uncomfortable, that it just means that you're eating a little more than usual. So you're eating more than you would feel would be appropriate, is generally what's going on here. So people will, even when they're they're doing the program correctly and they're eating to satiety, they're still like a little bit systematically eating under the hunger drive to some degree, because, you know, people can't suppress their knowledge of how much calories are in things. And they've got a little bit of a schedule, and they're watching the number on the scale, and they're playing the game a little bit. And so what happens in this kind of situation is that, just like any other animal, you're going to be, you're looking for, there is a little bit of a connection to the pleasure pathway of dopamine by just the act of eating. So that is why dopamine exists primarily, is to let you know that you're on track with some behavior and that you should keep doing that to continue your genetic survival. So dopamine is primarily associated with food and sex. It's not just associated with supernormal food, it's associated with any food. So gnawing on some carrot sticks will give you a little bit of dopamine, which is a little nice in times of great uncertainty. So your desire to kind of just chew on something and keep the digestive process going is, in some ways, you're seeking just a little dopamine drip, and there's nothing wrong with that. And again, with the whole natural food, you may see a very temporary increase on the scale because you're topping off your glycogen tank, which normally you probably have not had topped off, because you've probably been systematically eating just slightly under the hunger drive, and not eating to comfortable satiety every day. And so you're now shifting that over a little bit, and so you're not going to gain weight behind this. You're gonna maybe hold steady. You're maybe gonna hold exactly steady where you are, maintain equilibrium, and on the scale you might gain a couple of pounds because of the water weight of the glycogen. This is not a disaster. The body is this incredible equilibrium machine, and if you were eating whole natural foods, it will compensate over the long haul. So the amount of calories that you eat on any given day is absolutely irrelevant. Your weight depends on how many calories you eat this year, and the body is a lot better than you at determining how many calories are in your food. You know, that nutritional label will tell you one thing, but your body knows. And if you're eating whole natural food, it's not going to get scrambled like it will with supernormal food. That's the problem with supernormal food. So if you're eating whole natural food and you're eating it even to the point of slightly uncomfortable satiety, this is fine. You're going to hold a slight equilibrium now that is going to naturally adjust. You're going to eat a little bit less than you did the day before. You won't even notice it because it'll be 20 calories less. But this is the finely tuned calibration machine that the body is, just like every animal in nature is. You know, there's no animal in nature that's overweight except for humans and the animals that live with humans. As Dr. Lyle says, isn't this just a little tiny bit suspicious? Like this says that there's something about the food environment, not the amount of food. So my dogs will also, eat to very comfortable satiety on their whole natural food. They really enjoy it, but they're not going to gain weight eating it, because you do stop eating at some point. Even if you're overeating, at some point the system shuts it off, and that is letting you know that it's going to compensate on an ongoing way. So and you are probably not discerning enough to be able to tell that difference, and certainly no calorie counter can.
Do you think that because so many of the people I work with, and maybe you too, come from such a history of restriction, very specifically these calorie counting programs or weighing and measuring programs, that they don't even know what satiety feels like, because when you eat whole natural food full of water and fiber like potatoes, rice, you do get full, you feel full, and I think that scares them, and they think they're overeating when they're not really overeating, because they have been weighing and measuring their food for so long, which clearly didn't work. Yep. So I'm wondering how you feel about those weighing and measuring programs.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. That people, until they have been doing a starch-based diet for some amount of time and learn to trust it, and it takes a process, and it takes a feedback process to be able to really start experimenting with eating into something that resembles satiety, and then correlating it with the data on the scale over a fairly long period of time, not a day-to-day kind of correlation, because that's going to be full of noise and garbage, but like eating into satiety and recognizing month to month that your weight is still declining. That's a process of, again, updating the information that changes the cost benefit analysis, and you just over time become more comfortable with actually eating enough food to fuel the machine and not eating the hunger drive. drive. And of course, we're all raised with some version of a weighing measuring program, even if that's a point system or, you know, whatever it is, it's some kind of measured food restriction. So that is what people are absolutely accustomed to. And they get that feeling of sort of Thanksgiving dinner in their belly from eating a bunch of potatoes, and are not recognizing the physiological process behind that, and that you're absolutely fine and the body is going to self-regulate and compensate for that. And people also get very, very spooked because they become they become so suspicious of any movement on the scale. So they'll have a big potato dinner and they'll feel that, oh, I'm so full, I couldn't possibly eat another bite. And then lo and behold, the scale is up the next morning because they're full of this water and this fiber and they haven't gone to the bathroom yet. And because they've topped off that gas tank of glycogen so much. So that will move that number up. You didn't gain any fat at all. You just changed the little equilibrium of what number the scale says. And the scale is this bizarre creation that also would never have existed in the Stone Age. No one in the Stone Age is going to say, oh gosh, Mary, it looks like you ate a pound of potatoes last night and you gained a pound and a half of water. Like, nah, you better feel real shitty about yourself today. Like, that's just not a process that happens. So what happens in the Stone Age is like, wow, I ate a lot yesterday, so maybe I'm going to eat a little less today. And this is not a conscious process. This is a process that your hunger hormones beautifully regulate as long as you get out of their way and let them do their job relative to the food that they're designed to recognize as actual food, which is not the food that we eat most of the time.
Right. Do you think for some people, though, the fact that they're not willing to eat starches and eat to satiety is what's causing them to overeat and possibly binge? Because
again, yes, the equilibrium machine. So yeah, if you've been systematically eating under the hunger drive by weighing and measuring and being afraid of starch and convincing yourself that, oh, you know, I ate 1,000 calories and I'm just fine, I'm totally full on that, that's all good. You can get away with that for some amount of time, especially if you've got a very strong matrix of motivation and you're estimating a big esteem payoff relative to staying on the program and losing some weight. But the body is not going to let you get away with this forever. And at its first opportunity, the first time the barbarians at the gate that is the pleasure trap detects any vulnerability in your defenses, it's going to get in. And that's going to be your 5-year-old's Doritos. It's going to be walking past your favorite steakhouse. It's going to be whatever calls your name in a moment where your routine has been disrupted. And routines are made to be disrupted. Routines get disrupted all the time. So the best defense against a disrupted routine is a belly full of starch, which is why I always have boiled potatoes in my fridge. For any time that I start to feel the call of something super normal, I make a little deal with myself that's like, okay, you can do whatever you want, but you got to eat a pound of potatoes first. And it's like, I can count on one hand the number of times I've continued to be interested in anything super normal after I've filled myself up with boiled potatoes.
wow. So Kelly writes, Chef AJ, that sounded so judgy. He's been eating cucumbers and raspberry all day. The Doritos was his goodies. Gee, see, I don't think you should be giving kids special food as treats. And I especially don't feel you should give them stuff with dairy. And that's what Doritos are. But anyway, she can be mad if she wants. But let's see.
Hashtag disagreeable, AJ.
I'm just realistic. I mean, I work with so many people because of their parents giving them Doritos that are struggling today. And other people are saying, you know, shouldn't be associated with food, give them a video game instead, that kind of thing. But, you know, because I see what happens when you get these kind of treats when you're 5 years old, then you struggled your whole life. At least I did. But anyway, on to the next question from Marina. She says, I was so on track and completely vegan for a few years, and then I kept making small allowances until I'm eating sad again. It seems harder to get back on track this time. Why is it harder now?
Yeah, well, you went up that continuum of supernormal food and you open the door back up to the brain recognizing that this is too good a deal to pass up, that there is so much more pleasure, there's so much more dopamine associated with those foods that are up the continuum, up the addictive continuum. So if you can imagine a continuum of like absolute whole natural food, plain potato, plain apple, unprocessed, like not even chopped up for your chewing pleasure, you got to gnaw on it off of the tree, all the way up to something like heroin. So everything is in between that continuum. So everything that we would call addictive, that is beyond a whole natural food, has just become a little more concentrated and a little more supernormal. So as soon as you start to open the gate to those things, they're hijacking the pleasure pathways, which are designed to be the cues to tell you that you're doing the right thing for your survival and reproduction. So these are reward systems that are built into the brain to encourage your survival long enough to reproduce, which is your entire job. And when you hijack them with supernormal stimulus or stimuli, you're messing with the whole feedback system of the brain. And so it's gotten harder to go back to it because the cost benefit analysis has changed to the enormous dopamine benefit associated with these supernormal foods. And so that's just, you will watch the process go, recalibrate as soon as you can get yourself out of the death grip of the pleasure trap, because whatever you're eating has some kind of supernormal hold over you, but it's not going to continue to have that kind of supernormal hold forever if you can just put it down long enough and get out of the acute withdrawal process. So if I were still craving alcohol at the same level today that I was when I first quit nearly 7 years ago, I would never stay sober because you'd be white knuckling it every day and craving a drink constantly. But these cravings have what we call an extinction curve. As you get further away from it and you don't put the substance in your system, eventually the nervous system says, well, I guess it looks like we're not going to get that. Like, it was great, and we really fought like hell to get it, and that's what cravings are, is like, it was just here. Like, if we work a little harder, we're going to find it, we're going to get it. But at some point, the system is smart enough, and it would be evolutionarily disastrous if it wasn't, to be like, well, all right, it was beautiful while it lasted, but I guess we're not getting that dopamine from that substance anymore. So it would be best to reinvest our time and energy elsewhere in the whole natural food that is giving us some dopamine, some pleasure. So you just have to get yourself out of that acute process, and it will feel as easy as it felt the first time, or feel easier in any case. So, as soon as we get back to something resembling normalcy, you could go put yourself in jail at TrueNorth Health Center or with Nate Gershfeld at his place in LA, and do some sort of fast or do some kind of reset in that way to accelerate that process that would really bring you back in tune with your true taste calibration. Or you could do something like just AJ's program, a Mary's Mini, a potato hack. There are many different ways that you can sort of accelerate the process of resetting your taste buds and recalibrating.
Nice. Nora says, I love the term supernormal foods for the highly addictive food-like substances that many people eat. And I believe in the pleasure trap, Dr. Lau calls it magic food.
Magic
so that's
food.
great. A lot of people who know you from True North, either they're watching live from there or have been there, saying how great you look, that you look like you've lost even more weight. I love how you mentioned the solution is a belly full of potatoes. That's like pretty much the answer to everything.
Oh, it's so,
me.
yeah. I mean, over and over again, when the pointy-headed scientists do satiety tests of foods, boiled and steamed potatoes, even the humble white potato, come out way at the top of the list of most satiating thing that you can eat. They're relatively high protein per calorie. They're very full of water and fiber. These things, like when you eat a pound of potatoes, you're really not going to be interested in much else. And it's such a little hack to just get you through those really difficult moments. And I'll cheat and I'll put hot sauce on them, or I'll put some 21 spice, like a little bit of salt in the hot sauce. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, in this sense, where if I'm putting some salty hot sauce on my pound of potatoes to keep me out of 1,000-calorie frozen pizza at Whole Foods, like, so be it. That is a trade that I'm willing to make to avoid getting sucked into the grips of the pleasure trap and the rabbit hole that I'm then going to have to claw my way back out of, because I don't want to go through that process again. I don't want to go through the hit to my self-esteem process and the self-loathing process that also has to be rebuilt. I would rather just continue to sustain the level of pride that I have in my accomplishments and do something that I know will get me through the day. And for me, that's very often potatoes.
Yep, absolutely. Wanda says, I was at True North in October. Dr. Hawk looked great then, but even thinner now. Yay. Good for her.
Guys, I'm going to blush. I really appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
And Susan says, hey, Chef AJ. Hey, Dr. Hawk. I'm listening from TrueNorth Health Center. Dr. Hawk is right about the potatoes. I've watched her slim down since my fast last summer. She looks amazing. She looks even thinner now. Stay disagreeable. Don't feed your kids junk food. Give that kid a potato. So very, very nice. Okay. So, I know you have to, we're almost out of time. I know you have to go see a patient pretty soon. So you could probably talk for a very long long time on this next question, so maybe you can just kind of give a Reader's Digest version, and then this will entice people to, listen to the Beat Your Genes podcast, which airs tonight. But first, I want to say there's a comment saying she is the female Dr. Lisle, but she's much prettier and much more kind.
Okay, I'll send all your checks in the mail for all of this esteem. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. And now she has been dubbed the goddess of evolutionary psychology. We're working on that t-shirt.
Yes.
So this is a very open-ended question, and this is what the subject of your book is about with Dr. Lisle. But Debbie says, but how do you work on the esteem part?
Oh, well, yes, you're right to cue me to like keep it short. That was a very Dr. Lisle move. I've seen you do that with him, where it's like, okay, just like contain yourself because we're on a clock here. The more I work with him, the more I sort of am also like, I didn't used to take 45 minutes to answer a question, but I'm watching myself sort of move in that direction, because these are such complex dynamics. And it does get to a point where you don't want to oversimplify things, because for people to really understand the process, you have to kind of go from step 1 all the way to step 189. But for working on your esteem process, the very short version of that is that esteem is, self-esteem. There's many kinds of esteem, but the one when we are talking about self-esteem, what that is, it is your evaluation of your own diligence toward accomplishing an important goal. That's what it is. And it comes via what we call the internal audience, which is a little committee of people that lives in your head. It's a designated tissue in your brain that is watching your rehearsal process to see how competitive you're going to be out there in the Stone Age village, where how competitive you are really matters. And so when we're preparing for battle, when we're preparing to be competitive, that requires a level of diligence and attention to the fundamentals of any important goal. So if you're wanting to lose weight, that goal has fundamentals. You have to do certain things every day to accomplish that goal. You have to eat healthy food. You have to eat whole natural plant food for the most part. And there's a couple of other things that are very helpful. You can get outside, you can move your body, you can do these things. They're not essential. It's really mostly about the food. But your self-esteem is absolutely a function of your internal audience watching how good a job you're doing with the basics. It doesn't care about the outcome. It doesn't care if you lost 2 pounds this week, or you gained 2 pounds this week, or you lost 50 pounds this year, or you didn't lose any pounds this year. It doesn't really care about that. What it cares about is what kind of effort you made to get where you are now. And if it's watching you and it recognizes that you phoned it in and you self-sabotaged and you could have done a much better job than you did, and you came up with all these excuses not to do it, and you avoided the competitive process, the internal audience is going to be a little disgusted with you, and you're going to feel it. Whereas if you did your best and you followed the fundamentals and you just did the basics day in and day out, regardless of the outcome, your self-esteem is going to rise, because your internal audience is going to give you an A for effort. It doesn't give you the A for the class, it gives you the A for effort. And that's what you want to be chasing in life. You don't want to be chasing the A from other people, who are all like, oh, you lost weight, now I want to date you, and I didn't want to date you before. That's what is actually mostly motivating people, but that's the wrong way to think about it. You want to attune yourself to the internal process of being proud of yourself. Self-esteem is just another word for pride. So the more you can kind of do a good job with what you know is going to eventually make you more competitive, you will unleash the self-esteem process, and that is actually like the engine of a happy life. So that's the shortest answer I can give to that very complex question, but we are writing an entire book about it. So.
Right, exactly. And so people are asking the name of the book. It isn't out yet, but that is the subject of the book. People are asking about the name of the podcast. It's Beat Your Genes, Genes. It will be on in 6 hours on Blog Talk Radio. You can listen to over 200 episodes on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, Stitcher, Spotify. People say, I love listening to Dr. Howk. She's a great speaker and person in general, very comforting and compassionate. There's a very funny comment here that was left by Jesse. I think the cravings committee in my head killed the self-esteem committee in my head.
Yeah, they definitely do battle sometimes. The cravings committee actually will try to lobby the self-esteem committee. So the internal audience has to it's a congressional office that has to deal with all of these lobbyists all the time. And the cravings committee will come in and try to make a case like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a lockdown and we're in quarantine. And if there's ever a time to get into the crappy food, this is it. I would totally be justified right now. And it makes its case to the internal audience. And sometimes the internal audience will get a little bit swayed by it. And then later it kind of wakes up out of its haze and it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm disappointed in everybody now. So this is the process. This is why it's process over outcome. It's like, just get back on the path and continue to do the things that you know are going to eventually lead you to success, regardless of whatever happened today and whatever vicissitudes you're dealing with. So yeah.
I love that you talked about the basics, because I've always heard in every area, not just weight loss, that people that are successful, they execute the fundamentals better than anyone else.
Yeah, it is. It's all about just getting really familiar with the fundamentals. It's the phrase that we will use sometimes is that it's a string of pearls. So if you're making a movie, people don't sit down and make a movie. They make one tiny little scene after another. It's like 1,000 different tiny scenes that they're like 30 seconds each, and they're all strung together like a string of pearls. And that's what all success is. That's what all achievement is. And the more little string, pearls that you put on that string, the more sense of accomplishment and self-efficacy you have, because you start to make some progress and you're like, look at that, I'm making a string of pearls. Like I've got some wind at my back. It's funny that we talked about Seinfeld early on, because he's notorious for talking about the human desire to not break a streak. So when he has a goal, he'll get a big calendar and he'll make X's on the calendar, because he recognizes that once you get some momentum, once you start pushing that snowball down the hill and it picks up some more speed, you don't want to break that momentum. You don't want to look at that streak of X's on your calendar and break it. And so he recognizes that tendency in human nature, and that's really what self-esteem is. He's tapping into his internal audience and his self-esteem process by watching his progress toward something that's important to improving his competitive position.
Right. Well, thank you for talking to us. People are very grateful for your time, and just because I've been trying to go live every day with some wonderful expert like yourself, with people stuck at home.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're doing
really,
that.
really fun. And Florence said, thank you. Such a great way to be stuck at home with two very intelligent, accomplished, and beautiful women. Well,
oh, well, that's lovely. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Nice. And Jessica says potatoes are the answer. And that's right. Get yourself a belly full of potatoes, and we'll all get this together. And, if you'd like to talk to Dr. Howk personally, you can just go to her website, or this is also Dr. Lyle's website, esteemdynamics.com. I had posted it on the thread earlier. Just click on it. You can select your time, and you would just love talking to. Imagine that this whole hour that she just spent is just on you. Can you imagine how it will propel you to the next level in your journey towards optimal health and weight loss, if that's your thing? Because she's actually done it. She's lost almost 100 pounds. She's kicked alcohol. She can help you too. Thank you so much, Dr. Howk.
Thank you, AJ.
I love talking to you. And
likewise.
Find out what size t-shirt you are, because that shirt is
I'm excited. I always like a little extra goddess bling, so I'm down.
So with large, medium?
Probably a medium. Depends on the cut, but yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. That we're gonna. I have a friend who's a designer, so we'll work on the art before we approve it. Thank you, guys.
We're gonna turn down a free T-shirt. So
okay. Awesome. So tomorrow it's at 2 p.m. and we have Victoria Moran. Thanks again, Dr. Howk. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
All right.
Take care.
Have a good one. Bye. Bye.